Hello, church. Welcome to today's holiday broadcast. My name is Henry Loke. This is God's Feeding Station. It's an honor to be with you again today. As we finish up this series from 2013, today we're talking about the timing, why it happened, when it happened, and how it was prophesied about. Tomorrow, we're going to leap forward in the annals of God's Feeding Station history, and we're going to jump to 2016. And we're going to talk about the Christmas story from the Gospels and the New Testament, and talk about the Christmas story in and of itself, what happened that night when Christ came to save us all. So I hope you'll tune in for that. So again, I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Have a great day, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Today it's going to be interesting, and Pastor Doug is here. This is day 3 of the lost and missing AWOL voice that's gone absent without.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming back.
Yeah, it needs to be back for preaching and all that stuff. Yes.
But today we're gonna look at the timing of Jesus' arrival and the prophecy and some of the things that surround that. Understand that it's just one opinion, so to speak. It's just kind of one option of many that are out there. But we thought it would be interesting to kind of look at this because we're looking at the divineevidence.com website where we got this, and they bring up some very interesting things as far as timing of Jesus coming and how the math all works and differences of how the calendar used to work versus how it works now, and how this all kind of plays itself out. Again, it's one opinion. It may not be the right one, but we think it looks pretty good to us.
It's interesting to talk about. That's
I think
sure.
It's just because I think we get really wrapped up about calendars and days and all that kind of stuff. And the bottom line is, how important is that really? I think it's more important that he came, more so than when he came. But
right, because there's so many ways to frame it. Let me throw in to make sure you don't get our audience doesn't get too caught in the allowing the devil to have a foothold over relationships, arguing and breaking because one person has put together all of the timing of Christmas on a Jewish calendar, the other one has put it together on a Roman calendar, or a mixing of the two, or we're into a modern day calendar where it's like, a Hallmark holiday or whatever you want to call it. And what happens is there are some interesting ways to frame it. Now, me personally, I'll just say straight out front, I do not believe that December 25th, as we would know it today, is probably the best answer. Okay, that if I wanted to just look at it chronologically, right. I don't think it probably is. However, I want to add to that and people are saying, well, now is not just is his voice jacked up, but so is his brain. I would add to that.
Both of us, because I agree with you.
Okay, that for me, it's pretty irrelevant because it happened so long ago, and when I say irrelevant, it doesn't change salvation because salvation doesn't come from works or from our understanding of how we put together the exact calendar. And it was a time historical past which God left for us. And in saying this, I do think, though, that a celebration of the biblical Christmas is extremely important. So the fact that culture wants to spend it on the 25th of December, it's way okay with me. I know that I was called by Jesus and from the voice of God to serve his kingdom and to be a fisher of people. And if the culture wants to do Christmas on July 15th, I'm okay with that because I'll just proclaim the biblical message of Jesus on July 15th or September 15th or April 7th,
right,
tax day, whatever. I don't care. Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Well, let's get to that biblical part of it. We'll talk about, again, we're talking about the timing today. And the first thing we're going to look at is, again, Isaiah. And we seem to be looking a lot in Isaiah, but there's a lot of prophecy in there about the Messiah. Isaiah 53:2 says, he grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. And so this root out of dry ground analogy, I think, and I agree with what this website is saying, it refers to this appearance of Jesus, the appearance of the Messiah during a time, they hadn't had any prophets for a while. It's a time of upheaval. Israel is now in a bit of chaos. They're under the thumb of Roman rule. The religious leaders are doing their whole thing with adding to God's law and putting all these little things that makes the Sabbath thing and just almost impossible to keep. It's a time of rebellion. The Hebrews are just trying to get out from under the thumb of Rome, and they seem to be a little bit more concerned with religious rites and traditions more so than with what God has for them, and with getting out, like I said, from under the thumb of Rome. And now when Jesus appears in the midst of this whirlwind of political mayhem, and all of a sudden this guy comes and establishes this new covenant, and it just really turns things on its head, and people go into just apoplexy about what this guy's talking about.
Well, you know what I want to add in that the answer of this tender shoot that will grow up like a root out of dry ground from the Isaiah scroll. I do believe that what this website is saying is bringing a ton of accurate historical information of the cultural context at that time, and to me, it's so well put together. However a person wants to choose to say, was it fulfilled that he's the tender shoot that grows up in the dry ground? I mean, there's, we could say, well, then why didn't he show up in Yuma, Arizona, where I grew up, because the ground's pretty dry there.
Right.
And but the reality is that that's a wonderful historical answer from the years that I've studied the history around the first century, and the what happens when Jesus shows up with the new message and the new revelations from God, and with an apostate people who are just filled with rebellion and stiff necks, and they need to return to God. And so I think that's a great answer for that. That's what I would just say.
Okay. Well, we'll move on then to Genesis 49:10, which says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Now, the take on this is that according to this, there would be two signs that would take place shortly after the Messiah showed up. One was that Judah, the tribe of Judah, would lose its what they call tribal identity, and the Jewish judicial power would be eradicated, is how the website puts it. Now, it's really interesting to look at it and to understand that when you and I think it's pretty prevalent in the Bible where things are at politically. Judah and Jerusalem as a whole is under Herod the Great, and it's already starting to lose its political swagger. It doesn't carry the power it once did over its own people, and in fact, Herod is a Gentile, and he succeeded the Maccabean people, which was the last Jewish family to reign in Jerusalem at that time. The legal power of the Sanhedrin was now being limited under Roman law, and that's the whole reason why the religious leaders had to take Jesus to Pilate and have him condemned under Roman law, because they were no longer allowed to put anybody, they weren't allowed to execute capital punishment as we know it under their rule. They had to go through Rome first, had to go through their political machinations, and so this whole thing happens, and Jesus shows up in the midst of this, and shortly, well, not so long afterward, is when Rome finally has enough, and they overrun Jerusalem and basically tear down the temple, and it's all gone. But it doesn't happen until Jesus comes and fulfills all these prophecies of the Messiah.
That's good. Well, again, I think he's using some pretty good historical reference points to try to say, this is what was said in Genesis, and here we are. And I know that there are lots of Jewish historians who, although they did not recognize the Messiah, I bet you they could document most of everything that was responded in here as being true historical reference. And so it depends on how you want to connect the dots. But for me, again, it's just another piece in the cumulative case. You can set it on the scale and see if it begins to tip the scales to the truth. Jesus is the Messiah.
Right, I agree. Now, this next piece we're going to give you is pretty long and drawn out and pretty complicated, and I'm going to try to simplify it a little bit. The prophecy in Daniel, right? Daniel 9, talks about this whole 70 weeks are determined for your people, for your holy city. Know therefore and understand this, from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. After 62 weeks the Messiah shall be cut off, and the people of the ruler who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Now, everybody knows this is a 70-week prophecy, and I am not the prophecy guy, and trying to interpret this stuff just makes my head hurt. But some of the things that are laid out here, obviously, 7 sets. They believe the week, the interpretation is the word week represents 7 years, correct? Am I right in that?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's probably fair enough to say.
Okay, and then so 7 sets of 7 is 49 years. Added to that 62 gives us a total of 490 years. So what Daniel is saying here, that it's going to be 483 years would pass between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the Messiah's death, right? So now you have to go back to Nehemiah. And it's in the month of Nisan, 20th year of King Artaxerxes. I'm surprised I still remember how to pronounce that thing. Nehemiah petitions the king to rebuild Jerusalem. So Artaxerxes agrees to issue him approval to rebuild the city. And from history we know that Artaxerxes ascended the throne in 465 BC, making 444 BC the 20th year of his reign. Okay? Yep. So you with me so far? All right, so now to get this, to do the math here, this is interesting because I read this and I was like, I had no idea this. There is apparently a difference between a biblical year and a calendar year, which Correct. I did not know. Did you know this?
I did.
I did not know this. So in the past, years have been measured by lunar cycles, and so it's basically been 30 days per month, period. Right? No 31, no 28, no 27, no leap year, nothing. So just 30 days. So now obviously this has all been before we figured out that the Earth rotates around the sun every 365 and a quarter days, right? But
at least that's what we've been told.
That's what we've been told. Yeah, who knows?
Keep going.
Who knows,
yeah.
Right? So, but a biblical year, or what they call a prophetic year, only is 360 days. Which is really interesting. So that would make like the seasons would shift, and according to our calendar,
and that's why earlier in the last broadcast I was talking about the timing and how, depending on how you frame it,
right,
can make all the difference to what day you come up with.
Well, this is gonna, now as I read through this here, as again, credit to the divine evidence for figuring all this out, because I had no clue to this. So, all right, so we have this 360-day thing, right? And they use a couple of verses to demonstrate this, and they use Revelation 11:2-3 as an example. They will trample the holy city for 42 months. I will give power to my witnesses. They will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed with sackcloth. Now, according to these guys, this verse refers to the 7-year tribulation. I think we all agree with that. And it talks about the 2 witnesses, who is probably one of the things that I can make sense out of in Revelation, who will preach the gospel for 3.5 years, or 42 months. Now, the Bible states that 42 months equals 1,260 days, which gives us, if you do the math, it gives us a 360-day year, right? And there's a couple of other references you can go look at. And again, it's the divineevidence.com. You can go check it out. So now we get back to the prophecy in Daniel. And this is where it gets really interesting. So Daniel says that there will be 483 years, biblical years now, between restoring not restoring Jerusalem, the decree to restore Jerusalem, and the death of the Messiah. So this is what we know. A prophetic year is equivalent to 360 days, right? 483 biblical years between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the execution of Jesus on the cross. Okay? So we know that, as we talked about earlier in Nehemiah, the decree to rebuild Jerusalem was issued in 444 BC. And history shows that Jesus was crucified in 33 AD. Right? He was 33 years old. So now, if we do this, what we call our year, right? The solar difference, what they call a solar year, the difference between 444 BC and 33 AD is 476 years, right? And understand, you have to remember that there's no 0 AD. It starts at 1 AD and goes from there.
Right.
Right? So our answer is not 477, it's 476. But now, if you do the math based on a biblical year, and I know it's a long way to kind of get back to this point, but if you do the difference, the difference between 444 BC and 33 AD in modern, what we call a year now, 365-day year, you need to convert it back to the biblical year, and you do that. If you do the math, you do that, the 476 by the difference, right, by 365 days, you get 173,859 days total, right, by our year. But if you take that and divide it by the biblical year of 360, guess what the answer is? 483.
Wow.
Which comes out to Daniel's prediction. Now, that was kind of a long way to get there, but I think I did it because I think it's really important to get to the accuracy of God. He's very consistent, and he's very accurate with what he says is going to happen and then when it plays out. And so it was, like I said, it was a long way to get back around that. But as Daniel prophesied, how many years prior to Jesus did Daniel prophesy? I mean, I don't know what that math is, but years and years and years before the Messiah even gets here, Daniel lays it out almost exactly. I won't say almost exactly, to 483 years between the declaration of Nehemiah and the Messiah's death.
Well, interesting, God being logical and being omni and without contradiction, he will use things like those who believe, well, I can figure this out mathematically. As I was sitting in the studio listening and you were unpacking this whole concept, I was thinking this is almost like a theological / math lesson.
Right.
On addition, subtraction, and conversion. And
well, I had never even known that 360-day thing. I didn't even realize that.
Well, and so, you look at what's going on today, it's just a real small microcosm, but here in the United States, we're doing these things with daylight savings time, there's these little variations. Mm-hmm. You take these variations and you follow them over 2,000 years or 3,000 years, mm-hmm. You've got some big time changes.
Yes,
okay?
You do, yeah.
Yes, you do.
Yep.
And so some people have chosen to study numerology and study numbers and dates and trying to understand or unpack a Bible code. I do think that there is some logical. I believe that because God is logical, he's consistent without contradiction. He does provide the answers in various ways. So I thought that was fun to sit back and watch you kind of unpack the possibilities of what you were getting from the Divine Evidence website.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think it's just one
concept.
More piece to add to the puzzle.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in all of this thing, and I'll let this be my last thought, I think with all of these things, God does not take anything by chance. He doesn't do anything by chance. It's not haphazard. It's all precise. It's all pretty, pretty focused on how he's going to do things, what he reveals to people, why he does it, when he does it, how he does it. And I think, over the last 2 weeks, we've covered a lot of ground, and I think we've just scratched the surface on all the prophecies pointing to the coming Messiah, his death, his resurrection, what it means, his triumph, his victory over sin and death. This has been the plan from the beginning.
Right.
From day one. This was the plan. To have the creation, he knew how it was going to go. He knew we were going to have to deal with the sin piece, and he dealt with it because he's the only one who could deal with it. We don't have the ability, the power to master sin. We just don't. And so God provided this bridge to reconcile us back to him. It was done with intent. It was done, if you we just listen to the timing piece. According to Daniel, it was done down to the precise year. But the bottom line is it's done to save us from the ultimate death and for us to be able to relish in the ultimate triumph of Jesus, which is over sin and the final death spiritually.
Well, that is the bottom line. And the thing that I'll close with is that I've enjoyed the opportunity to broadcast the debate between various skeptical ideas and potential prophecy and potential fulfillment, multiple fulfillments. I know this. It will be a work of the Spirit of God that will break down the strongholds for people to come into a saving relation with Jesus Christ, who I proclaim and announce and decree today is the Messiah. In saying that, if this evidence is helpful to point you and break down those barriers, then I thank God for the work of His Spirit in using this information, this data, these biblical reference points. For those of you that have already come to a saving knowledge of Jesus and you recognize Him, as the disciples were asked, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah, or the Anointed One, or the God's Christ." And He's told you received this information from heaven. It didn't come from a worldly way. I would say in the same thing that hopefully these details will arm you into the sure foundation of a God who is logical, who is consistent, without contradiction, who is passionate, pursuing, leading, drawing, breaking down all of the areas of strongholds and darkness, and the light of the world has been revealed. His name is Jesus the Christ.